This time on the Robbie and Dad Show, we explore every little detail of the Apollo mission patches. We're going to tell you about the shape of the patch, the details on the patch, the names of the astronauts, and a little bit about each mission. And stay tuned till the end because we have a huge surprise. This is the Project Apollo patch. It is a round patch with a thick gray border with the words Apollo and NASA. At the center of the patch, there is a large letter A with 3 of the stars from the constellation Orion, forming the horizontal bar of the A. To the right, there is the Earth, and to the left, there is the moon with the face of Apollo, the Greek sun god. There is a double trajectory that connects the two that passes through the 3 stars of the A. This is the program patch, but all other patches are considered Apollo mission patches. This is the Apollo 1 mission patch. Its outer border consists of the American flag. The inner border, which is a gold circle, consists of the names of the astronauts. The Apollo 1 astronauts consist of Command Pilot Gus Grissom, Senior Pilot Ed White, and Pilot Roger Chaffee. In the center of this patch, there is an Apollo spacecraft in low Earth orbit. On the right of the Earth, we can see the moon, which is reminding us of the goal of the Apollo missions. The mission never launched because of a tragic fire that killed all of the crew members. Due to this tragedy, Apollo 2 to 6 were either scrapped or unmanned. That's why there are no patches for Apollo 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. This is the Apollo 7 mission patch. The nature of Apollo 7 was to orbit the Earth safely. This is why there is a command and service module orbiting around the Earth. Next, there is a black ring with the names of the Apollo 7 astronauts. The Apollo 7 astronauts consist of Commander Walter Schirra, Command Module Pilot Don Isley, and Lunar Module Pilot Walter Cunningham. The Roman numeral 7 appears in the Pacific Ocean. This was the first manned launch of the Saturn V rocket. All missions from now on will be using a Saturn V rocket. This is the Apollo 8 mission patch. The shape of the patch is a command module. The red figure 8 circles the Earth and the moon, representing not only the number of the mission, but the translunar and trans-Earth trajectories. At the bottom of the figure 8, the names of the 3 astronauts are written. The Apollo 8 astronauts consist of Commander Frank Borman, Lunar Module Pilot William Anders, Command Module Pilot James Lovell. Figure 8 represents the free return trajectory, depicted here. Before Apollo 8, the furthest anyone had been from Earth was about 850 miles. The Apollo 8 rocket traveled nearly 250,000 miles. This is the Apollo 9 mission patch. This patch is perfectly round with a red border. The interior is blue with the astronauts' names on the edge. The Apollo 9 astronauts consist of Commander James McDivitt, Lunar Module Pilot Russell Schweikart, Command Module Pilot David Scott. If you look closely at McDivitt's name, you can notice the D in Divot is actually filled in with red. This refers to the Owen Maynard letter designation for the Apollo 9. There's a letter designation for every Apollo mission, as you can see on this list. Owen Maynard was a Canadian engineer who contributed to the design of the Canadian Avro Arrow. To the left of the badge, we start off with a Saturn V rocket. Apollo 9 had a command and service module like every other Apollo mission. But it also had a lunar module because they were testing it for the first time. Every Apollo mission from now on has 2 modules. That's why they need call signs for both the command and service module and the lunar module. When the command module was transported to NASA, it was wrapped in blue wrappings. So the astronauts thought it looked like a blue gumdrop. So the call sign for Apollo 9 command module was gumdrop. Call sign for the lander was spider because it looked like a spider. This is the Apollo 10 mission patch. The patch is in form of a shield with a yellow border. There's also an inner border which is blue with the names of the Apollo 10 astronauts. The Apollo 10 astronauts consist of Commander Thomas Stafford, Lunar Module Pilot Eugene Cernan, and Command Module Pilot John Young. The mission for Apollo 10 was to go back to the moon. That's why in the patch you can notice that there is the Earth and the moon. The Roman numeral 10 is found sitting on the moon, and the command and service module is going right through it. The lunar module actually didn't land on the moon, but it is shown as orbiting the moon. It flew within 9 miles of the surface of the moon. The command module's call sign was Charlie Brown. The lunar module's call sign was Snoopy. This is in reference to the lunar module snooping in low orbit. This is also because the workers that worked on the spacecraft who did a really good job would get a silver Snoopy pin. Also, Apollo 10 was used as a dress rehearsal for Apollo 11. This is the Apollo 11 mission patch. The patch is round with a gold border. You will also notice this is the first Apollo mission patch without the names of the astronauts. The astronauts decided not to put their names on the patch because they wanted to dedicate it for all mankind. Apollo 11 astronauts consist of Commander Neil Armstrong, Command Module Pilot Michael Collins, and Lunar Module Pilot Edwin Aldrin. The eagle symbolizes that Americans landed on the moon. You'll also notice that the eagle has an olive branch in its talons. The Great Seal of the United States of America also has an olive branch in its right talon. In its left talon, it has 13 arrows to defend liberty. The eagle is looking to the right because it favors peace. So the Apollo 11 landing symbolizes peace for all mankind. The call sign for the command and service module was Columbia, and for the lunar module, it was Eagle. The Apollo 11 astronauts were actually allowed to come up with their own call signs as long as they were appropriate. But they weren't appropriate because the 2 names were Snow Cone and Haystack. Luckily, NASA did not like this, so now we're saved from having an Apollo 11 badge look like this. 104 years before Apollo, Jules Verne wrote the book From the Earth to the Moon. Surprisingly, the shape and size of the capsule is very close. It was his cannon that was called Columbia, not his capsule. Apollo 11 was probably the most known mission because it was the first mission to actually land on the moon. This is the Apollo 12 mission patch. The patch is round with a blue border. Next, we have an inner gold border with the names of the Apollo 12 astronauts. The Apollo 12 astronauts consist of Commander Charles Conrad, Lunar Module Pilot Alan Bean, and Command Module Pilot Richard Gordon. In the center, there is an American Clipper ship orbiting the moon. The Clipper symbolizes bringing foreign shores closer to the U.S. In the same way, NASA is opening new frontiers to space. Another reason for the Clipper ship is because all of the astronauts for Apollo 12 were Navy pilots. The portion of the moon that is shown represents the ocean of storms and is the landing area for Apollo 12. The 4 stars represent the crew members of Apollo 12 and Clifton Williams, the original lunar module pilot who died in a tragic air crash. The call sign for the command and service module was the Yankee Clipper. The call sign for the lunar module was Intrepid. It was selected by the people who built the lunar module. This is a painting by Jack Sperling of the Clipper ship Lightning. It served as the inspiration for the patch. Ironically, Apollo 12 was struck twice by lightning. This caused instrument damage, but they solved it by switching the auxiliary power supply. The major contribution of Apollo 12 was the deployment of the Apollo Lunar Surface Experiments Package, or ALSEP. It includes these 12 objects as seen in the picture. This is the Apollo 13 mission patch. It is a round patch with a golden border. One of the first things you'll notice is that there are no names of the astronauts on the patch. That's because the astronauts wanted to dedicate this mission to science. That's why they put Ex Luna Scientia, from the moon, knowledge. Apollo, the sun god of Greek mythology, was represented as the sun. The 3 horses are pulling his chariot across the surface of the moon. This symbolizes the Apollo missions bringing knowledge to all mankind. The Apollo 13 astronauts consist of Commander James Lovell, Lunar Module Pilot Fred Hayes, and Command Module Pilot Ken Mattingly. Unfortunately, Ken Mattingly caught a virus called rubella, also known as German measles, and was grounded. Ken Mattingly was replaced by John Schweikart. The call sign for the command module was Odyssey. This is reminiscent of the long voyage of Odysseus of Greek mythology. The call sign for the lunar module was Aquarius. Unfortunately, there was an onboard explosion that forced the mission to circle the moon without landing. This is the Apollo 14 mission patch. It is a round patch with a red outer border and a gold inner border with the names of the astronauts. The Apollo 14 astronauts consist of Commander Alan Shepard, Command Module Pilot Stuart Roosa, and Lunar Module Pilot Edgar Mitchell. The patch also has an astronaut insignia that is leaving the Earth heading towards the moon. The NASA astronaut pin was adopted in 1963. It features a 5-pointed star with 3 trailing rays passing through a halo. A silver pin was given to an astronaut once they were part of the program. But astronauts who made it to space were actually given a gold one. The call sign for the command module was Kitty Hawk, referring to the site where the Wright brothers first flew. The call sign for the lunar module was Antares, which is referring to the star on which the lunar module orientated itself for a lunar landing. Apollo 14 collected up to 95 pounds of moon rocks and deployed several scientific experiments. Big Bertha is the first discovered meteorite from Earth and is the oldest known Earth rock. This is the Apollo 15 mission patch. The patch is round with a thin blue outer border. Next, there is a whiter border that has the names of the astronauts. The Apollo 15 crew consists of Commander David Scott, Command Module Pilot Alfred Worden, and Lunar Module Pilot James Irwin. Lastly, there is a thin inner red border. Inside the patch, there are 3 stylized birds, or symbols of flight, representing the Apollo 15 crew. They are shown flying over the Hadley Rill landing site. If you look closely behind the birds, you will notice the symbol XV. This symbolizes the number 15 in Roman numerals. The call sign for the command module was Endeavour. It was named after the ship Endeavour that was captained by the explorer James Cook. The call sign for the lunar module was Falcon. It was named after the United States Air Force Academy's mascot. This is because of Apollo 15's all-Air Force crew. The Apollo 15 was the first to bring a lunar roving vehicle. It is electric and weighs 460 pounds without a payload. From now on, all Apollo missions will carry a lunar rover. The rover is carried in the lunar module and deployed like this.
So we thought we'd try it here for you.
Commander David Scott performed a live demonstration for the television cameras.
For our Falcon.
He held out a geologic hammer and a falcon feather and dropped them at the same time.
How about that?
This is the Apollo 16 mission patch. It is a round patch with a blue border with 16 stars that is representing Apollo 16. Also, at the bottom of the border, it includes the names of the astronauts. The Apollo 16 crew consists of Commander John Young, Lunar Module Pilot Charles Duke, and Command Module Pilot Ken Mattingly. I'm happy to say that Ken Mattingly finally made it to the moon after being grounded with Apollo 13's mission. The background of the badge has a gray lunar surface, on which there is an American eagle sitting on top of a shield. The shield has red, white, and blue stripes representing the people of the United States. And finally, over the shield, there is a gold NASA vector. The call sign for the command module was Casper. It was named after the cartoon character Casper the Friendly Ghost. This is because of the white Teflon suits worn by the crew look shapeless on television screens. The call sign for the lunar module was Orion, after the constellation, because the crew would use Orion to navigate. Apollo 16 brought back the biggest moon rock that weighed 26 pounds and was named Big Muley. This is the Apollo 17 mission patch. It is a round patch with a gray outer border with the names of the astronauts. The Apollo 17 astronauts consist of Commander Gene Cernan, Lunar Module Pilot Harrison Schmitt, and Command Module Pilot Ronald Evans. There was a lot of pressure on NASA to send Schmitt because he was the only professional geologist to land on the moon. To the left of the badge, there is Apollo, the Greek sun god. The image of Apollo that was used was the Apollo of Belvedere sculpture that was in the Vatican Gallery in Rome. Behind Apollo's head, there is a stylized eagle with its wings spread. On its wing, there was red bars that represented the U.S. flag. The 3 white stars represent the American flag and the astronauts. The eagle's wing partially overlays the moon, suggesting that the moon has already been explored. Apollo and the eagle are both gazing towards Saturn and a galaxy, suggesting that we will one day visit these celestial objects. The call sign for the command module was America. This was a tribute and a symbol of thanks to the American people who made the Apollo program possible. The call sign for the lunar module was Challenger. This is referring to the challenges of the future beyond the Apollo program. This matches the badge as the challenge of going to other planets and galaxies. Every Apollo mission had 3 passengers, but this time, for Apollo 17, they had 8. And there was 5 mice. Their names were Fee, Fi, Fo, Fun, and Fui. They were used for the Biological Cosmic Ray Experiment, or BioCore. The scientific objective was to determine if heavy cosmic ray particles injure the brain, eyes, skin, and other tissues. So Apollo 17 is the last Apollo mission. The others were canceled. So, we have a surprise. We're going to be launching the Saturn V one more time. Now, as I promised, it's time for the surprise. We're going to be launching Apollo 18.
Ready? Countdown, go.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4.
Keep it pressed, keep it.
And if you want to see the Mercury missions, we need at least 300 likes to show us that you really want it. That's it for now for the Robbie and Dad Show.
He's Robbie.
And he's Dad.